Pikimai kakimai, welcome to video number 4, more complex layouts. So in this video, which is covered in just 2 slides in the lecture notes, I'm going to look at a few more fancy aspects of grid layout. So if we use this wing window here as an example, if I resize the window, the white space gets spread around in some way. It looks like something like 3/4 of the white space is going into the window at the top half of it, and the 1/4 or so is going into the bottom. So that's one aspect that we're going to look at, resize behavior. And the other aspect I'm going to look at is the idea that of what we call a hierarchical layout. So this thing you can think of as a top window and a bottom window. And the bottom window can be resized like so. Within the bottom window, or I'm actually going to call that a pane, within the bottom pane, or maybe even a frame, we have 2 subframes. And we can drag the divider line on those subframes around as well. So that's called a hierarchical layout, and we're going to look at how to do that in tkinter, at least a very simplified version of that. So as a starting point, I have a program here called resize naught, and when I run it, it does something pretty boring. It has 2 buttons in it, one at grid cell 00 and the other at grid cell 11, and nothing happens when I resize it. They stay right where they are. You'd expect something interesting to happen. You'd expect some white space to get sprayed around as needed. So let's spray the white space around. How do we do that? We tell the window that we wish to configure I'll start with its column configure column 0 to give it a weight of 1, and I'm going to window.column configure row, or column 1 I should say, to give it a weight of 1 as well. Let's see what that did for us by way of explanation. So there's our new window, and when I resize it, you'll see the white space gets used horizontally. Nothing much happens vertically. I didn't do any reconfiguring of the rows. So what has happened here is you'll see the white space is being spread around the grid cells uniformly because the weights are equal. If I want to get more into the, say, the second of the 2 columns, column 1, I can make that a 3, and now when I resize the columns, you see that the button number 2 is moving around a lot more. That's because 3/4 of the white space is being put into column 2, or sorry, column 1, 0 origin, and 1/4 is going into the first column because the sum of the weights 3 and 4 is 1, 1/4 goes into column 0, 3/4 goes into column 1. Hopefully it doesn't come as a surprise to see I can do the same thing with rows. So window.row configure row 0 to have a weight of 1, and I'll do the same, give a weight of 3 to the other row, window.row configure 1 to have a weight of 3, sorry. And now when I do that, you get 3/4 of the white space. I missed something. Row configure 1 to have a weight of 3. Nothing is happening on rows. Oh, I did them after the main loop. Dumbo! Try that again. Ooh, close that. Don't want to see that. Sorry, I should have done those before I went into the main loop. There's no point in doing them after. Try that version. So now, hopefully, we get 3/4 of the white space is going into the bottom right grid cell, and 1/4 is going into the top left. And that's pretty much all I want to say about resizing. You may want to explore the documentation a bit and see how you can start off with a bigger window as well as choosing the weights to redistribute stuff. We're not going to do much of that, but it's something you should know about. We don't have time to get into very fancy layouts here. But there is one other aspect you need to look at, and that is the idea of, the idea of using frames. So I'm going to start with this here, and I'm going to try to create a hierarchical layout. So I'm going to introduce a new widget called a frame. So I'm going to say frame left is going to be a new widget, which is a frame widget. As usual, I have to say who the parent is. Its parent is the window. It doesn't have any text, so I can't give it that parameter. I can, however, do some fancy things to make it look cooler. I can give it a border width. In the lecture notes it's 4, but I think 8 comes out better on this screen during the demo. So I'm going to run with a border width of 8, and I'm going to set it to a ridge. So the relief is the sort of the 3D look to it. So I'm going to give that one a ridge relief, and I'm going to create a bottom right frame as well. Frame right is going to be a new frame in the window with this big border, fancy border width, and it's going to have as its relief a groove. So hopefully something's going to look groovy. Out of date joke, sorry. Groove. And as with widgets, I have to grid them in somewhere because they are widgets. So I'm going to go frame left dot grid into the window at, sorry, row equals 0, column equals 0. I'll get there yet. Column equals 0. And I'm going to grid the right frame in at 1, 1. So frame right dot grid at row equals 1, column equals 1. Now at the moment, if I run that, nothing happens at all because frames are just containers. Although they're widgets, they are container widgets. That is, they are containers for other widgets. So in order to see anything, I'm going to have to stick something in these frames. So I'm going to create a couple of buttons. So I'm going to have button 1 is going to be a button. Now, the parent of this button is not going to be a window as it was before. It's going to be frame left. And I'm going to give it some text because I want to be able to see what it looks like. And I'm going to call it button, button. I'll call it top left to be a little more interesting than 0, 1 and so on. And I'm going to grid that in at 0, 0. No, I can never remember to put row equals 0, column equals 0. I'm going to have another one of those and I'm going to stick it in the right-hand frame. This is going to be called button 2 and I'm going to call that button BR for bottom right, and it's going to belong to frame right, not frame left. Let's see what that did for us. There it is. So now we have, I'm going to make this a bit bigger so I can drag it around. Haven't got any resize, haven't got row configure, column configure set, don't worry about that. Hopefully you can see something that looks vaguely like a ridge around that and something that looks vaguely like a groove around that, and there's a button inside each one. Those are frames. And each of the frames has its own geometry manager, its own grid. So when I go row 1, column 1 when I do this gridding of button 2, this is within the grid for button 2, that is which is the grid for that particular frame. So I can add other buttons inside a particular frame, and it'll save me doing a lot of typing. Here's an example here that I'm just going to run so you can see what I mean. If I run this one, I get a somewhat more interesting looking 2-frame system. So on the frame on the left, I've gridded in 2 buttons, TL1 and TL2, both in column 0, but in rows 0 and 1. Whereas in the bottom frame here, I've gridded in my 2 buttons at row equals 0, column equals 0, and row equals 1, column equals 1. So that's really all I'm going to say about hierarchical layouts. You can explore them, and you can explore different weights for resizing windows and see if you can find out how to create a window of a bigger than default size so that you get something a bit more interesting. That's all for this video. Bye for now.